Okay, well, welcome everybody. Uh, This is panel Solidarity News on reopening the university, on safely reopening the University of Oregon, a community panel. I'm joined by Rajiv Ravanaskar, president of GTFF, Nick Keogh, ASUO Sender, and Chris Sinclair, president of United Academics at University of Oregon. Uh, we convened this panel. There's lots of questions and it's up in air about how the university will op- operate this fall. The university president, Michael Schul, has inclined that he wants to have in-person operations, but it's still not set, and there'll be an official announcement on August 26th. But we want to get a perspective of from students um, and faculty and graduate students how that should look like. So far, we've seen sports postponed by the University of Oregon this fall. Nationally, we just saw Notre Dame halt classes after just 8 days into the semester. Um, Classes start for University of Oregon September 29th. And so let's get started with the panel. I'm going to go to Nick Keogh first. Question for all the panelists is going to be, what should be the metrics for reopening? And if the campus does open, how can it best protect students, faculty, staff, and community members?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me here. I think this is really important to be having these conversations with like various campus stakeholders because we all have a stake in it. But yeah, my name is Nick. My pronouns are he and his. I'm an ASUO senator, seat 17, representing the poli-sci department, the geography department, international studies, and a few others. And then I'm also, I'm an undergrad, third year, study poli-sci, 3 p.m. And I work a lot with ASUO and Reclaim. So just real quick, that's a little background about me. But yeah, what should be the metrics for reopening? And if campus does reopen this fall, how can the university best protect students, faculty, staff, and community members? Yeah, that's an excellent question. We're dealing with COVID-19, and it is a deadly and infectious virus, and we need to be taking it very seriously and have like really clear and stern metrics that we stick to for reopening. And yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure like what those metrics should be, like whether it's like a vaccine or whether it's like certain metrics with like testing and like the positive rate. I don't know like the exact, I'm not a scientist, let me put that out there. So like, I don't know like what exactly the metrics would be. But I've definitely seen like some metrics from some other institutions and other entities. Like I'm pretty sure like on late July, Kate Brown released some like metrics for the Oregon K through 12 schools. And I think what it had said is like, in order to resume any in-person learning, even part-time, a county needs to have at least less than 10 cases per 100,000 people for 3 weeks straight. But yeah, I don't know like how that would like apply to the Eugene Springfield area or U of O. So I'm not really sure exactly what that would look like, but you know, we do need to have like really stern metrics because this is like a very serious thing and like lives are on the line. So we need to be like really methodological and like intentional with this. But yeah, and then like what can campus do to best protect students? Like, I'm going to be honest, like in my opinion, I think like we should not reopen. I think we should be fully remote for spring. I mean, it's as ideal as it would be for all of us to be together again and things to be back to normal. Like, that's just not the reality of where we're at with how this country has handled COVID and containing it. Maybe if like it would have been taken really seriously and like we would have really hunkered down, like maybe there would be ways to reopen in fall. There would have been ways to reopen in fall that were safe. But to me, I just like I don't I don't really see that being possible. And like, I mean, like the UO, they have their coronavirus website, which they're very proud of, that has like what their protocols are, kind of with like requiring people to wear masks, with like social distancing, classes over 50 or remote, classes under 50 can be in person, but they're like they're like socially distant, physically distant, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I don't think that's enough. I think it's a little bit like of hygiene theater. And I mean, if you go on their website right now, they like have like how many people have tested positive like at the UO, and like I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but like the people at UO have tested positive for like in the UO community have tested positive already, and like that, like in the in-person school year hasn't even started. So yeah, I just, me, like I think like our number one priority right now should be the health and safety of all students, faculty, staff, and the community members. And like right now, Lane County has been like, I think like Lane County's been handling COVID pretty well. And like our numbers have been okay. But like, I really could see that changing with like the U of O opening. And like, we can't forget that like, we are also like accountable to like the Eugene and Springfield community and the people that live here that aren't even connected to the UO. And like with reopening, like a lot of people are coming back to campus from all over, and where they may be coming from, COVID may not be as like contained as it is here. And yeah, I just think it's really risky, and like we need to stop like putting profit and money over people and like the safety of our campus community. And I know that UO is in a really tough spot. They were in a tough spot before COVID. Like, there's been like a trend of privatization in our higher education institutions and like disinvestment in higher education and K through 12, and yeah, just all education. And those things kind of like, this really gets to like the bigger structural issues and like systemic issues. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that like the longer we don't take this like seriously and don't take like serious measures, like the longer we're going to be dealing with this, and like the longer it's going to take for us to get back to normal operations. And so I know that UO is like really concerned about money, and like so are so many higher education institutions. And honestly, I'm worried about many of them. Also this like brings in the part of like, what's this, like, how's the state legislature going to help us through this and stuff. But yeah, just at the end of the day, like we are where we are. This is where we are. It's unfortunate, but like we need to start taking it seriously and really like bunker down. And I think that includes like going remote again for fall. And we did it in spring, and there was of course difficulties, but for me personally, like my classes went fine. A lot of my friends did fine. Like obviously it's not the same experience. It's not as interactive. It's not as easy to like be engaged and like retaining information. And it's also very hard to pay full price tuition for that when it's obviously like not as quality, but it's the reality of where we're at. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. Chris, would you like to go? Same question.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Chris Sinclair. I'm the president of United Academics of the University of Oregon. We represent over 1,600 faculty here at the University of Oregon, including tenure track faculty, career faculty, postdocs, researchers, and some other categories as well. Um, so obviously, there's been a lot of discussion around reopening in the ranks of faculty and in the union. So just to give you a little bit of history is the wrong word because a lot has happened, but overview. We, with the help of Melissa Grayboys and some of the other unions on campus, sent a survey out to faculty and students and graduate students and staff and community members. Frankly, anybody could take the survey, asking their perceptions of the response to COVID so far and their projections as to maybe their hopes and fears, as it were, moving forward. This was in May, late May, early June. So obviously the landscape has changed. However, based on that survey at the time, undergraduates were more excited about returning to campus than graduate students were, and graduate students were slightly more excited to return to campus than faculty were. And by return to campus, that's kind of shorthand for return to more or less normal in-face operations. Clearly, there are people on campus right now doing work, and that's not what I'm talking about. At any rate, that was kind of the picture in early June, and then. Obviously, we have seen the outbreak unfold across the country. We've seen outbreaks in various areas. We have seen what has happened when some of the social distancing measures have been relaxed in certain parts of the country. And in the last couple of days, really, we've seen what happens when we bring together a bunch of individuals back onto a campus. I'm specifically talking about UNC, Chapel Hill, and then also what's happening at Notre Dame and other places as well. Quite frankly, those are just the two ones that were forced to take the quickest action. But there are other universities that are in the same boat. So, you know, in some sense, we do have we're in an excellent position to be able to see what's happening with other universities before we need to bring students back or to make that decision whether or not to bring them back. And we have a couple of very early data points. So I think that the smart thing to do is to keep observing. Let's see what happens with other universities. Let's see if those are outliers. I suspect that they are not, based on what we know of the disease. But we still have a little bit of time before our students come back. So we will get to see if that can be handled. Now, in terms of metrics, it's difficult because we could talk about theoretical metrics that if we had our hands on, we would be able to make very smart decisions. But oftentimes it's difficult to get your hands on any metrics. And so we're dealing oftentimes with approximations to what these true numbers are. And then it's not even always clear, you know, if you can draw information or reasonable conclusions from that information. But there are some things that are eminently measurable. And I think, for instance, in the closure of UNC, and the Notre Dame one happened much more recently, so I haven't read up as much on it. But the closure of UNC, basically what they were running into was that the dorm that they had set up for quarantine was almost out of space, right? So that is a very specific metric, which is quite measurable. At any time, you know what it is, and you can say, oh, hey, there's only this many more spots. What are we going to do afterwards? If there's no additional contingencies there, then, you know, that provides you a way of making a reasonable decision. So, you know, for that metric, that's the sorts of metrics I think we need to look at. Obviously, we can talk about, you know, R0 and all of these kind of epidemiological metrics, but I don't think that those are well enough measured or understood the implications of in our specific environment to make decisions on. So instead, I think we need to look at operational metrics like how many beds do we have for students, how many people are out sick, what are we doing around quarantines, how will that work to make those decisions. Again, though, just with the evidence that we have, the very early evidence from UNC and some other places, it looks like some of those decisions might be made even before we bring students back. Again, depending on if those are outliers or if that's just the way things are going to run. So yeah, I think I'll leave my section at that, but I'm happy to later on address more things.
Thanks. We'll go to Rajiv, and we also just joined as Johnny Earl from SAU, and he'll answer the question next. So just a reminder, the question is, what should be the metrics for reopening? And if campus does open, how can it best protect students, faculty, staff, and community members?
Great. Thank you, Matthew, for putting this together. Really appreciate the invite. Great to join other union folks and student activists on this for this meeting. I just want to start by, I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Ravi Shankar, the president of the Graduate Teaching Fellows Federation, which represents over 1,400 graduate employees at the U of O. I just want to start by saying, that we actually already have people on campus right now. We have classified staff, we have grad employees, particularly in labs, and they're facing health and safety issues right now that need to be addressed. And this has been brought up to UO administration. You have people coming through buildings without masks, or people working in labs who maybe have traveled and then didn't quarantine coming back. So there are some, and a number of other things. So there are already some concerns playing out with the limited operations that are there on campus as we speak. In terms of criteria, I think UO admin has identified several, and in terms of determining whether a reopening should happen on their decision day on August 26th, they're looking at the extent of the campus and community spread of the virus, and testing and contact tracing capacity, supply of personal protective equipment, the county reopening phase level. So we're at phase 2, so that's going into their decision making. The capacity for self-isolation and quarantining. And so if the university admin decides to stay, we're going to do fall with up to 70% in person is the number that I've heard. What I would say there is, well, we need transparency in terms of the cases that are happening and the ability and the location of those cases. We need to have capacity for testing at a very large scale, and we've heard some indication of that. And we need to develop a culture in which people, students, and workers on campus don't feel that they're pressured to have to come, even if they're under the weather. Which we have a culture in the universities where overworkers come in and people feel pressure to come in even when they're not well. To use campus facilities. You need an abundant supply of masks and protocols that would be followed to the maximum level. You need folks to be quarantining as soon as they come back to Eugene and prior to them coming onto campus. You also need standardized protocols in departments across the board. We've heard that some labs and some departments may need specific protocols for their circumstances, but we actually need more standardization. And I would say that certainly from our vantage point, I'm sure this is shared by other folks, we certainly don't want any police involvement in enforcing protocols. And this is an issue that's come up in some of our meetings with admin. And I'd say that really at the end of it, as one of the earlier speakers mentioned, that we need to have a vaccine to be available and distributed widely for us to really start to feel that there's a possibility to return. But I would say that, there are these metrics and there are these protocols and there are all these things in place. And I think looking at and thinking about all of those, I think from our vantage point in GTFF, we've really been questioning the premise of reopening, given the risk that's posed by bringing thousands of students back to the community from around the state and country. And that reopening of having thousands of people come back is very different from what we have right now with limited operations on campus. We've seen, I think, 48 positive cases among students already, and this is without many students back yet. UO has actually stopped sending out emails about new positive cases, so you have to go searching for that information. And as it is, like UO Portland is actually full remote. Oregon State has said that they're going to be 90% remote. So I guess the question is, what are we waiting for in terms of at least making the decision to know where we are? And I think what we see, just to sort of tie what we see at the university to broader issues, is that what we see in our society, and more specifically with the economic system in place, is that we cannot even handle a short period of time where some things come to a halt in order for people to stay safe. Things have to keep moving, and we have no public support infrastructure in place that would support people and their livelihoods when there's a crisis in the midst of a crisis. So we have this society and economic system and a set of people who are in charge who basically indicated that, well, if you can't work, maybe you don't deserve to live. That's the kind of stakes that I think a lot of workers are facing, and I think it's important to be really honest about the situation that I think a lot of workers have been put into. And when we're talking about solutions about this problem that universities face, I mean, yes, revenue shortfall is real, but I think we're going to need to see solutions coming from a much higher level in terms of state funding, in terms of a federal bailout, which I think a lot of industries are talking about. And I would just say, just to sort of finish up my part, I would say if any GE deems that their situation, the situation that they're facing is unsafe, well, they can lean on our contract, our collective bargaining agreement, which offers protection for them so they don't have to work in unsafe conditions. And I think GEs are already starting to think about what that looks like. And I'd also want to give a quick shout out to, on this note, like to football players who were part of this initiative with Pac-12 Unity, and UO Ducks players who are involved in organizing around working conditions that they're facing, making larger demands around compensation and racial justice, and also clearly stating that they would withhold their labor if they didn't feel safe in their conditions. And then, not shortly thereafter, we saw the Pac-12 season and other conferences have canceled the football season for fall. And I would just say that, to close out, that we have, sharp concerns going forward, obviously in terms of health and safety, but really also in terms of the possibilities for overwork, even if there's some percentage of classes that are in person, that people are going to get stuck with in-person and remote scenarios where they're trying to accommodate people's needs and, people's health considerations. And I think that, the university admin, from what I've heard and from my interactions with them, is not attentive to these labor considerations at all and overwork concerns that we have.
Thank you so much. Johnny, are you ready? Johnny, are you there? Oh, looks like dropped him. We'll return back to him, but let's go on to the next question for now. With Chris, how has the university involved your union and colleagues in the conversations for operation this fall, and how have you also had conversations with other unions?
Hello.
Oh, hey. Oh, good. Oh, Johnny's here. So I'll return to the question. So the question is, what should be the metrics for reopening? And if campus does open, how can it best protect students, faculty, staff, and community members?
Those are hard questions. I assume the metrics would be, for me, how is Lane County doing? I think for the university, my personal thought would be to test every incoming person to campus, but I doubt if that's something that's possible. I know they're going to test 500 students living in the dorms, but other schools are testing the entire student body and staff. University of Kentucky, 30,000. The university has had plenty of time to try to figure this out. We've been meeting for the last month and a half, I think, but the university has been somewhat closed since April. So what is the best metrics? They're saying some of the metrics is the local area, the state of Oregon, but people are coming from all over the world. And obviously, my personal opinion is Eugene's in a little bubble. It's not growing as fast, so people are coming to this community. Students and everyone else should volunteer to be tested. I know I know it's not fair to make anybody do anything, but at the same time, you're putting all of our lives at risk. As I constantly remind everyone, there's 400 of us who are essential employees who've never left campus, and we put our lives on risk every day. So the metrics that you're looking at is that how many deaths are not deaths, how many people are affected with the virus in the general community as we get a return. I think that's criteria because the majority of the student body lives off campus, 80%. And so what was the other part of your question?
How can the university best protect both students, but also faculty and staff and community?
Well, personally, I think all lectures should be all lectures should be online. And this is my personal opinion. I think all lectures should be online, and all labs is when people should come in when they have their labs. But at the same time, I represent 1,700 employees at 1,700 union members whose majority of our job is student facing. With me saying that, there is a tremendous amount of ability for possibly layoffs. We have seen their power to do that already. We have 250 people on extended leave. They all are not coming back. Most of those are food service workers or deal with something in athletics or in the dormitories. And obviously the dorms are going to have half as many people, so they're not going to need as many people.
I think we lost them.
Yeah, looks like we lost. Would we like to move on to the next question and we can come back? Chris, would you like, and how is the university, administration, involved you and your colleagues in conversations around this fall? And also, what kind of conversations have you had with other people on campus?
So there is I don't know what the official name of this committee is. It's the Campus Reopen Committee is what we call it, which is a committee which is joint between various labor groups and some other non-represented groups of workers as well. This is in conjunction with UOHR. My understanding is this was put in place because there was not a lot of input into decisions being made in early days around COVID, and there was some pressure by the legislature or in Salem that the university should work with their employee groups to figure out what reopening would look like. I will say I am not on the committee, but I do pay pretty close attention to what's happening there via Slack and other ways of kind of watching in real time, as it were. It looks to be a very managed committee in the sense that, there are preconceived ideas of what the university can and cannot, or will and will not do around reopening for COVID, right? And a lot of these things really are financial, right? We don't have the money to do something, and so therefore the administration sees it as impossible, as opposed to, well, okay, but that thing has to be done, and if you can't do it, then this becomes an unsafe operation, so find the money, right? I mean, there's this little bit of managing that group to kind of come to more or less preconceived conclusions as about how to move forward. There is also kind of the typical HR MO where you give lip service, or you have conversations about something by saying that you're going to talk about something later. And then when it comes up later, you say, oh, well, we already made that decision. We talked about it before, right? There's this little feedback loop, which is not very productive for moving forward sometimes. So, I think that committee certainly has been meeting. People have certainly been talking. The ideas have certainly been floated. It's not that necessarily nothing is being said or nothing is being heard. However, my impression is that it has not really moved the needle a whole lot in terms of what the university was going to do. They're still going to do what they were going to do. Except, there has been a little bit of pressure from labor that says, well, we still, for instance, have health and safety articles in our respective collective bargaining agreements. And, there are some places where minor pushes have been able to to make some minor modifications so that we don't, for instance, invoke a demand to bargain around a mandatory subject of bargaining, for instance, health and safety. So I would say that the process has not been particularly productive. I'm glad that the conversations are happening. That is a place where various groups on campus, stakeholder groups on campus, do have an opportunity to talk in the presence of the administration and to collectively band together or say, hey, no, we think this is not a safe path of action. That has been useful. We also have been talking with other unions and campus labor council, which meets regularly. There's also the Lane County Labor Council, which is not just campus unions, but obviously there are other people in Lane County that are affected by the opening of UO and what that looks like. So there have been some conversations there as well. So, I feel from that perspective, it has been good. We have had good solidarity, I think, in terms of the expectations around what reopening should look like. I think the consensus is maybe too broad of a word, but broad scale agreement is that it would be safer if we did not have a full scale reopen. And I personally predict that's where we will be. We should reflect that last week the administration did send out a survey to instructors for fall term. This is all instructors, graduate and faculty, asking them to specify whether or not they would be willing to work on campus. Maybe that's not how it was phrased, but they said that they would honor those requests. Obviously, that situation is not perfect. People can be pressured to make decisions that they might not otherwise make, but at least there has been an opportunity for people to say, no, I no longer feel comfortable working on campus in fall, in spite of what I might have said back in May when the universe looked different. So in that context, I have not seen the data. Obviously, I'm not privy to that data. I expect many faculty and many graduate students have said, no, I'm not interested in teaching on campus anymore because of the COVID situation. So I expect that while they do say that they would like to have a significant live component to what the fall looks like, that from the viewpoint of instruction, that is going to be largely dictated by the results of those surveys. So that, if 90% of people say, no, I don't feel comfortable, then that's what it's going to look like moving forward, because they have said that they will honor those requests. So, I expect that we will see a significantly curtailed educational environment, and this is terrible, and I do want to respond to the concerns of ASUO, right? I mean, obviously, it's very difficult to teach in this environment, just like it's very difficult to learn in this environment, and so it's obviously not what faculty want, right? Really what I want is I would love to be able to put my students back in a class and do small group work and do the stuff that I know actually pedagogically leads to success in mathematics, which is what I teach. But what I get to do is this thing right here, which is obviously not perfect. However, I think that safety first, and I think that ultimately we're going to have to figure out, first of all, how to make this sort of interaction work in the meantime until we can get that vaccine or whatever it takes to get live again. So I've probably babbled on a little bit too long, so I'll return it to you, Matthew.
Thanks. We'll go on to Nick next. Has the administration reached out to ASUO, and how have they involved you as a undergrad also?
So I really appreciate this question because I am just like a big advocate and fan of like shared governance, inclusive decision making, democratic processes, et cetera. Because this university runs and exists because of students and because of staff and faculty. So we really deserve like a say in how things go, and like decision making on campus and like what reopening may look like if that's the route we go. And that's kind of really what Reclaim UO is all about, which I like touched on earlier, but basically like Reclaim UO is a coalition of students, faculty, staff, and community members that's working to reverse the privatization of higher education and like in the long term democratize the board of trustees, just because like the current structure is pretty problematic, how like the board of trustees members become trustees members, and like right now we have a board with people from Goldman Sachs and from the timber industry and Columbia Sportswear, et cetera, and like some of these people don't even live in the state of Oregon, and they're just like disconnected from campus. So that group, Reclaim UO, is really like pushing for a democratized board, so we can ensure that we have students, faculty, staff, and community members on the board themselves making these decisions, and just because they're like much closer to campus and like much closer to the impacts of these decisions. So yeah, I just really appreciate this question, like getting at that overall like importance of including like all the different stakeholders across campus. But yeah, with that said, as far as like undergrad, the undergrad side of things go, I haven't heard too much. I like to think that I'm pretty like plugged into like the happenings of UO. There's like stuff I miss, of course, but I really haven't seen much. I know that there was like a few surveys that have gone out. One went out just like a few weeks ago. That was from admin, I believe. And I took that survey and I thought it was a really interesting survey. I thought the questions they were asking were very like directed towards like reopening being the only possibility. There was not even really like questions like, well, do you even feel safe coming to campus at all? Like they didn't even like allow the space for that. And then, yeah, on like the ASUO side of things, I sit on the ASUO Senate, which deals a lot with like the allocation and disbursement of the I fee. And so we don't work with admin that too much directly. We really work with like student groups and like who ASUO has contracts with. And we do like a lot of the budgetary stuff, and like exec works on more of like the student advocacy, connecting with admin, and that sort of thing. But still like ASUO senators are like student leaders. And we definitely have not heard anything. No one's even reached out to us from admin about like what we may think about this reopening process, or like involving us in like the decision making for like what this is going to look like. Like that definitely hasn't happened. ASUO exec has been definitely more involved, but you know, admin typically doesn't listen to us that much. But I did talk to Isaiah Boyd, he's the ASUO president right now. And he kind of let me know that they have been like having conversations with admin and giving input. And they have like, ASUO has like a secretary of student health who's been really like, I think, coordinating that. And they've had meetings with like housing, food services, the IMT team, the team working out the UO like testing system. And yeah, they've been doing a really good job to advocate and like prioritize. ASUO has been doing a really good job of like advocating for the safety of students like in these decisions. But yeah, at the end of the day, admin, they don't always listen to us, or they just kind of like appease us until we like are quieter or like give up or people graduate. But yeah, I think there's definitely like a lot more room for students to like be involved in this process, undergrad and student leaders. I wish it would have happened sooner. I didn't really know about like, I have heard of like the COVID like reopening committee, and I'm definitely curious like if there's even students on that or undergrads. But yeah, And then also just, I have talked to a few student groups like leading up to this panel to see like what, if they've heard anything. And I got into contact with like the Women in STEM student group, and they like had let me know that like the only thing they've heard at all from admin related to COVID is that like one of their rooms was canceled back in like April or something. So yeah, I don't think student groups have been, and like student organizations have been like reached out to or asked for their input on these reopening plans as well. I do know that like there's like these COVID student tracers, which is very interesting. And they get paid to just be like contact tracers, I guess. And then I have heard that there is going to be like a COVID conduct board that I guess handles like when people are not in compliance with the protocols or whatever. So I guess students are involved there a little bit, but yeah, I think like there's always room for more student involvement, and it usually always like historically at UO and like a lot of higher education institutions, it's like always something that's just like an afterthought. But I would, yeah, just like to end by like reminding us that like students and faculty and staff are like the backbone of this university, and like what allows it to continue and persist. And it's really important that it isn't seen as an afterthought, and that we are actively involved like in these decision-making processes and like what reopening is going to look like. I'll end there.
Right. Thank you so much. We'll go to Rajiv next. So you're interested in with the GDFF, you got people that are both helping out with classes, instructing classes, and also students. So maybe you could speak to some of that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first, I just wanted to, it's interesting to hear that, you know, students have not been reached out to, or that there's at least a sense that there hasn't been much engagement, because I've heard from UO admin that they're wanting to get students involved, particularly around sororities and fraternities, given that there have been some big outbreaks in other universities, you know, specifically related to off-campus parties and things. And their whole, you know, UO admin sort of whole approach is contingent upon, oh, we're going to do this culture building PR campaign around students. And it doesn't seem that that started, and we're about a month out. So I just wanted to point that out. We can get into discussion around that. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I mean, Chris alluded to it, that there's a committee, and I've had the pleasure, I don't know if that's not the right word, but, you know, I've taken part in this with our staff organizer. And so it's called the Employee Safety Reopening Committee. We have meetings every Friday. We've had these meetings every Friday this summer since mid-June, I think. And this, you know, committee includes union reps, employee group representatives, research scientists, and high-level HR reps, as well as the police, a couple of reps from the police, to go over protocols and to go over specific, you know, enforcement guidelines and things like that. Initially, admin only wanted one rep from each employee group and union, and the meeting should only be for 1 hour every other week. So if that, I think that gave an early indication that they just wanted to have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. And then we had, you know, we pushed for, and maybe UA also, United Academics might have also pushed for it, that we have more than one representative, that we have longer meetings and more regular meetings. So I think we got an early indication that they just wanted to say that they wanted to have meetings just to say that they were having meetings. And so, yeah, I think as with most things at UO, it's sort of the illusion of inclusion. It's, you know, more useful as a way for employee groups and unions to orient around one another, I think, and to get to hear what they're thinking. We have other spaces to do that, but that's really the only useful aspect that's come out of it. You know, and what really is key, as with many other things, I mean, the body lacks any decision-making authority. So on more than one occasion, we were asked to provide inputs. And then before any of us really had a chance to respond and provide inputs, we saw an email announcement about the exact thing that we were supposed to provide inputs for. So I think that's indicative, I think, of, you know, decision-making on campus in general, as directed by admin. I just want to throw in that we also have something called a COVID task force. And the COVID task force is more focused on the financial side of, effects related to COVID, and sort of doing the financial planning and making recommendations to the bigwigs who run the show about, essentially probably how to deal with, how to deal with cuts, or what units should be cut, I think, is sort of the terrain of that conversation. It's really important to note that the task force does not include any classified staff member or GE. And so, again, it's indicative of, there are a bunch of faculty members on there. I don't know how many of them would be active in UA. I hope some of them would be. You have one student rep who was brought in late to those meetings. And again, it's indicative of, well, that task force is going to make these recommendations, and just the composition of it and the way that it was brought together and who's excluded from it, I think tells us a lot about the university and how it functions. So I think, we kind of come up against this recurring problem of decision-making power and authority concentrated at the top. And the crisis reveals that we really need to fundamentally transform institutions or organizations in our society. And I think we can begin with the university. Universities like UO talk a big game about being at the cutting edge and in terms of research and innovation and caring about equity and inclusion. But ultimately, these claims are all hollow. At the end of the day, those making six-figure salaries at the top aren't going to get affected by the cuts that they'll say are necessary to save the university. And honestly, we don't really need these people running the show. In their positions. We'd be better off redistributing their bloated salaries and moving toward a model of shared governance and university democracy. And I think this would actually help us be better equipped to deal with future crises and mitigate some of the harmful effects that would be felt by those who are in the most precarious positions.
Thanks so much. We'll move on to Johnny if he's there.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, cool. So the question is, how is the university involved, your union and colleagues, in the conversation around campus operations this fall, how it will operate?
As my brother said right before me, the reopening committee, we had one person on it. Now we have two. I'm the second person on it. Presently, I think right now, I was just looking over some information a moment ago about reporting if someone's not wearing a mask, who might be a contractor or a staff member. So in a small sense, the university wants us to tell on each other to enforce the mask policy. I don't know what our members think about that, but I've had some of our members confer with me about people not wearing masks and them being very concerned. Other than the committee that we do work, our SEIU is asking for a little bit more in a letter of agreement with management presently about some schools don't even have any members on any form of covert related meeting group or reopening. So what we're asking for at the bargaining table presently is a notification when someone might be sick. How do you notify? What's the proper period of time to notify one of your fellow workers without violating privacy? We're also asking for the recall process to be extended, because presently it's only for a year. It might get to be 2 years. We have quite a few members who are already out on, as I mentioned earlier, on extended leave, so they're not working, but their health insurance being paid for through October 31st. And so, yes, the university has been conferring with us a lot about putting our members on mandatory work share, or some of us who just ended voluntary work share just last week. Now we're moving into the realm of mandatory work share, where there is a 20% cut in your FTE, or possibly even a 40%. There's a couple units here on campus that have already faced that, and either you either take those cuts and have unemployment reimburse you, or you can exercise your layoff rights. Those are hard decisions. Because unemployment only pays 80%, and it takes forever to get your money. Presently, people who've been on WorkShare here on campus for the last 2 months have not received any form of payment. Other groups, those who are on extended leave, have received payment. Plus, the CARES Act gave them that extra $600. So we have talked to the universities a lot about what happens to our members. They've been keeping us informed about what different departments wants to do cuts. So every time we meet with management, which is once a week, about labor issues, we're hearing more of our people being placed on some form of leave. Yes, but that's in our contract. They're supposed to confer with us on that. But when it comes to the virus, other than our representation on the committee and the weekly or daily covert emails the university sends out, there is no real contact with us. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Thank you so much. So we're going to move on. Starting out with Chris, if you have any follow-up thoughts or if you have any questions for other panelists.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, well, I think moving forward, we're in as everybody has alluded to, we're in a very complicated situation, right? I mean, if we could just agree that the only thing that we had to worry about was health and safety, then I think the solution is obvious, right? And I don't think just obvious to the people in this room. I think generically obvious, if that was literally the only thing that we had to worry about. Unfortunately, it's not. And as people have alluded to, this is because of just, you know, partly structural inequities in our country, partly the systems of governance that have kind of accumulated over the years and the way the universities work and are funded, and a variety of other things that were exposed as dangers to higher ed, not just the University of Oregon, but dangers to the whole enterprise of higher ed in this country. So, you know, I think we need to think about that moving forward, because even if we decide as a group, even a broader group than the people just here, that, you know, campus needs to be not open or not predominantly open in the fall, it doesn't really solve the problem, right? Because there's going to be a winter and then a spring and then a summer, and then this is going to keep going. And it's not clear that there is going to be an effective vaccine very quickly. And it's not clear, based on the politics of this country, if there will be a quick adoption of that vaccine to the point where we actually get quickly to some sort of herd immunity, where we can go back to some sort of quote unquote normal life. So in some sense, eventually we are going to have to answer the question, how do we kind of start getting back to normal even before we have something that allows us to get back to normal, right? So unions and community groups and students, we're going to have to figure out, we can't be remote forever, right? The university doesn't have money to pay the people for us to be remote forever. The state doesn't have enough money to pay the university to do that. I mean, there could be a completely change in how the budget works at the state level, but it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen quick enough to address this. And unless Biden wins in the fall, then the federal government is not going to bail out the states or the university systems either, right? So in some sense, the best thing that we can do, I think, in order to guarantee a stability for the industry of higher education, is work very hard to ensure that Trump is not president after next January, because that is going to be the source. The federal government is going to be the thing that decides to bail out higher ed, and as long as the Trump administration is there, that is not going to happen. So it's kind of a weird suggestion, maybe, is the way to address this health issue is going to be address a political issue. But I think in this situation, because we are not at the point where we can just close everything down and lock this thing down again, those days are in the past. This now becomes a political problem, right? And so can we survive and keep it together long enough to solve that political problem? Because if there ultimately are dollars coming down and some sort of stimulus from the federal government, then next winter, next spring, next summer, next fall looks like something that might be doable, right? Where there is some sort of patch that allows us to figure out how to be operational in this kind of hybrid world long enough so that we get whatever health solution is necessary and we can go back to normal without, universities just having been decimated in the meantime. So that's kind of my takeaway. It wasn't really a question to other members. But I see this as a moment where, as much as I would like to think that the solution is science, and obviously the vaccine itself, partially the solution is science, but part of the solution is politics. And can we get better governance so that, we can slowly go fix the systems that led us to the place that we are right now.
Thanks so much. I'll go to Nick. Any follow-up thoughts or questions?
More might come to me, but I mean, something I've been thinking a lot about as like an undergrad, and that I know like a lot of other undergrads are talking about, is tuition. And it's going to be really curious to see like what organizing there is around tuition on campus this fall and how that's going to impact this conversation as well. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about is the guaranteed tuition model that UO passed back in March. And I don't know, it's kind of funny because the last time I saw Rajiv was at that meeting, and Reclaim UO was there like in hazmat suits, and it was like the first week of COVID, and we basically were there to ask the board to take COVID more seriously, because they were the board of trustees was meeting that's like basically the second week where COVID was like really big, like March 17th, so that kind of week. And they were voting on a guaranteed tuition model, and they were voting to like allocate like approve funds for a jumbotron in Autzen Stadium for $12 million. And yeah, so Reclaim UO had shown up to just ask them to delay that decision on the jumbotron because it seemed pretty inappropriate with like what we knew was ahead with COVID, but also like to reconsider the guaranteed tuition model because we told them so many times that like it would put the university at an even like a serious risk if something were to happen. And guess what happened literally 2 weeks after it was like implemented? Something like really serious like this happened. So I wonder how they're feeling about that. But yeah, it's wild because yeah, we were there in those suits and we were standing in front of the doors and asking them to delay the meeting because it was over like what the recommended amount was. And Chuck Lillis was walking up and we were just kind of like, hey, like it's not safe for you to be meeting. And he kind of like came at me and like shoved me into a glass door. And I think Rajiv was like, it's like, why are you making these decisions? Like, it's not safe to be meeting. And Chuck Lillis looked right into the camera and he said, I'm not afraid. And I think that just really like was a really symbolic moment for like how the rest of this this reopening conversation and everything is gone. And like in that moment when COVID, we weren't like even really sure like what it was going to look like, but we knew it was like pretty serious. Like in that moment, the university was like, and the board of trustees and like admin was like showing that like, you know, for them, it really is like money is the priority. And like, here we are, like 1 month away from the fall term starting, and like they're still in the same place where like money is a priority, and over like the health and safety and like vitality of like our campus community and students, faculty, staff, community members, etc. So yeah, those are just some things I've been thinking about, and it's just wild how this has developed and how that started. And I will be really curious to see like if we do, which it's looking like we might be fully remote, like there are going to be conversations around tuition. Like it's inevitable. The students are already talking about it. They're posting it in all the meme pages. Like there's going to be some kind of organizing around that. So it's just going to be curious to like see what that looks like and how that continues to like impact these like these reopening discussions and whatnot. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. I think we'll go to Rajiv next, and Johnny afterwards if he can join us. And after that, I think we'll close out by what the question after that would be, what's some actions that community members can do, and how can they follow what you're up to? So, but just first, like, any follow-up thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad that Nick brought up the Board of Trustees meeting that we were at. I think for me, that's sort of indicative of a lot of the way things work, because that was really at the beginning of as the crisis was unfolding. And I think that indicated to me, like, really the nature of the entity that we're dealing with and the people who are in charge of making decisions. So again, this is at a time when campus is really starting to close down. I forget exactly. I think it was the end of winter term, and campus is starting to close down. I remember my classes, my GE sections were basically fully remote by that time. And, a lot of things got canceled in the last 2 weeks. So we knew, like at that time, the situation was really getting worse. And it was a severe, we knew that we're in the midst of a pandemic. And these people who are part of the Board of Trustees and the people who planned these meetings literally didn't care that we're, going forward with, we're in the midst of this pandemic where we're going to have to go forward, in terms of taking this seriously and sort of shifting course. For them, shifting course to that meeting, they needed to go forward with the meeting because they had these really important decisions to make, right? They had to make this decision to improve the largest football scoreboard in the country. For college football, for a football season that isn't happening now. And so it's just, to me, is disgusting what happened that day. And I wish a lot more people knew about it. I tried to reach out to media and all, because I think what happened, the show of force by Chuck Lillis to force his way into the building. He initiated force on a student. It's a pretty severe thing. The chair of the Board of Trustees. And these are the people actually who are ultimately responsible for our safety. They're the ones who, at the end of the day, would have to approve whatever COVID planning and sort of safety mechanisms and things that are in place. Like that final decision really rests with them, as do many decisions. And that board does not function at all in a way that I think represents any of our interests. And each meeting, like the way that they run their meetings and sort of operate in general, I think is a big cause of concern that we need to do something. But what it indicated was they wanted to keep the ball rolling. They weren't at all attentive to the massive transition that faculty, the GEs, that students, that staff had to make literally in a week. We had spring break to make a transition. And I didn't really hear anything that even took that into consideration. How difficult would it be? I was doing the same GE class and I still struggled a lot. In terms of making a transition to remote. And I can imagine that would have been the same. I know the students in my sections were struggling. I'm sure faculty members were struggling. I'm sure staff members were struggling. And so it's just like they've never been attentive to that sort of the actual transition of what this meant for people's lives. And I guess that's, what we see time and again is they're so disconnected from the lives of people who work on campus and the people who make the institution function. They just are so disconnected from our lives that they just will go forward in making their decisions along the lines that they want to, without really any consideration for the challenges that we face. I'll just say a couple other things, in terms of, even if we go fully remote, I think that there are still a number of challenges to deal with. First, what I said to the vice provost in one of these meetings is like, look, you've already indicated to students that we're planning to be in person to some extent, to a large extent even. And so people planned around that. So people are coming back. As you see U-Haul trucks and things all around campus, you have people moving back, and that there's a risk associated with that the university will not take any responsibility for. They make it seem as if these people were just going to return on their own accord anyway. And it's like, no, there are real community risks here for a community that's generally, I mean, we fared pretty well compared to a lot of other places. We've had low sort of number of cases. I think we've generally had a handle just in terms of how things have played out. And I think the university is directly responsible for potentially threatening that. And I think that that's something that we should take on directly and work with community allies for. And I've certainly brought this up with some of our community allies, about these are risks that could be posed to the community. And yeah, I mean, moving on from that too, I think that, there's this big question about money. And I don't, to be honest, I wish I could sort of be hopeful about the possibility of some kind of federal bailout, regardless of the administration. I know that it certainly wouldn't happen under the Trump administration. I just don't think it would happen at all. And the university has shifted so much to this sort of private corporate model. And I wonder, if you look at really where it falls apart is they're private gifts that are made to things like a scoreboard and to specific projects. And it can never go to the people who actually need it. The people who are facing job cuts, private gifts never help us. And I think that's the key feature is we have a university model that literally has failed. And now it's hard to make the case to even the legislature, which is going to initiate cuts, I'm sure, across the board in many instances. It's hard to make the case even before the crisis that why should you bother about the university? Because universities basically, gone more and more in the direction of a private corporate model. And that money really is meant for, these corporate interests and private interests that give money are going to want a return on that investment. And that return on investment really doesn't relate to us in any way. And it's certainly going to be anti-union. It's certainly not going to take student considerations into mind. And I think that's kind of the difficulties that we're contending with right now.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Johnny. Just follow-up thoughts, anything you want to respond that other panelists have said?
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to look at a conversation that we had with the UVO administration, the provost and the president early April. They were set to have the most robust year ever in history. Their coffers were full, and they're getting ready. Their bank accounts were full, and they were really getting ready to make some money on the Olympic trials and all the things associated with that. It was going to be a banner year, and then the virus hit. It's amazing how it was going to be such a banner year, and some of our labor unions had a hard time trying to get a contract. But that's what they said to us. But one thing, since I'm elected by members who are looking for wage increases and stability in their employment, if we do not open up, we're going to lose some of them. We're going to lose some of them no matter what. That's obvious. But a lot of people are very, very, very uptight about is the university opening or not. Again, as I was saying earlier, I'm challenged by the situation that, yes, I like to see the university open up, but I sure don't want to see anybody die because of it. Now, also, we have to keep in mind that people are going to lose work. And there's a lot of insecurity around that, seeing that we have one of the highest unemployment rates in history or just coming off of that. If we don't open up, the university don't need all of our services. Quote unquote, that was the provost said 3 weeks ago. All labor groups are going to face cuts. Okay. Now, if we will open up, there's a possibility that, who knows, we're going to get a cluster and maybe someone will die from that. And that's frightening. That's sad. And it's, I have to agree with Rajiv. It is not worth one life. It really isn't. But again, I'm torn. Not about the life, but I'm torn about people being put out on the street and not have any employment. Again, I have 230 members who are on long-term leave, meaning that they're only collecting unemployment. They're still on the books here, but the university doesn't pay them, and a lot of them are not going to make it back. And they're putting more people on that same type of mandatory work share or extended leave. I think if we don't open up, there is going to be what's called the extended leave. They'll pay for your health insurance, but you're going to collect unemployment for a few months. Some people think that's a great idea, virus or not. I think I have to agree. The campus may be one of the safest places with the sanitation that we're doing on campus and putting out dispensers. And, one has to advocate for their own health, but the university is going to do whatever it can to try to keep people healthy as best as possible. But the problem is as we're seeing in our committee meeting, they can't control what happens to students who live off campus. And I live right off campus, and they're not partying, but there are groups of them, and they're moving in, and it's just a matter of time. And so they're on weekends, and they're going to maybe bring back the virus back to campus. I don't really know what to do or what to say. I surely want everyone to stay employed. I want to stay employed myself. Do I have to sacrifice my health to be employed? Well, presently I've been doing that since March. But, the majority of our members are not on campus. Out of 1,700, only 400 of them are on campus. So those are working remote. Those are people in interface positions, but maybe that's no longer the case. I'll have to look back to what Chris said earlier, re-envisioning higher education. We have to re-envision how we can get more money from the state, re-envisioning what tuition will look like if everything's online. Oregon State specifically said that they would be looking at tuition reductions next term. I'm sure the U of L will have to do the same if they're online. No one's going to pay $40,000 out of state to live in Eugene and take classes online. It's ludicrous. Yes, but also, presently we're doing a hybrid. We're doing online and remotely. You pay for that emblem of the degree from the University of Oregon. But then again, you don't need to give your life to the University of Oregon. I don't really know what to say. I'm afraid that if we don't that we don't open up, a lot of people are going to get laid off. And who knows when they'll make it back. But at the same time, I'm more confident that if we do open, that maybe we could keep a handle on campus at least. But I don't know about the community around us. So we'll see what happens on August 26th. I have no idea. Again, from our reopening committee, looks like it's all a go. We're meeting as if we're going to open up. So I'm telling people, it looks like we're going to open up. What I think there is more than 45% of the classes can be taught remotely, 55% in person. Well, they mentioned that statistics getting ready to change after some other universities have been affected by a virus. I'm willing to bet, as Chris mentioned earlier, that they're surveying faculty and that a lot of them are not interested in coming back. But some of the questions they're asking faculty, would you be willing to come and teach your course and leave campus? And have your office hours online. So you only come to campus to teach that specific course. I don't know. You can't operate a university without a faculty. You can't run a university without staff. And you obviously can't run a university without GTFs. But I don't know if they're opening or not. I'm hoping they are. But I'm apprehensive about this whole thing because just this week, the university that's opened, Notre Dame, opened up and closed all in the same week. Well, the university has been saying from the very start that they felt they're in a good position to make a decision because other schools open up earlier. Well, we now seen schools open up and close. So I wonder what their decision is going to be. I'm willing to bet, even if they don't open, the dorms are opening up, with less students before in the past. They're going to open up, just like Oregon State opened up its dorms. They think that that's still a good way for students to learn. The only problem there is that in our meeting last week, one of the presenters talked about one of the highest risk areas is communal living areas. So those working in it and those living in it. So a lot of stuff don't make too much sense to me. Yeah, I need an income, I need to work, but at the same time, I don't want to die. And I'm at that age group, and I'm very vulnerable. But it's not about me, because there's a lot of people who, if they don't go to work, they won't be able to eat. So those are the people I represent. So I'm looking out for their best interest, I believe. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to wrap things up. Start out, Chris, anything you'd like to plug, any call to actions, and how people can follow what your union's up to?
Right. Yes, thank you. Thank you for organizing this, Matthew. So if you want to follow what United Academics of the University of Oregon is up to, the first place is uauoregon.org. That's our webpage. And you can find our information on contracts, etc. If you're a faculty member and you have any questions about what does reopening mean for you, or you want to talk through maybe specifics of your situation, we're happy to tell you what we know, what we've been told about what reopening looks like. Absolutely happy to have that conversation anytime, and you can reach out to us at info@uauoregon.org. Obviously, the situation is extremely fluid. Things are changing quickly, and so I expect that there will be changes even between now and the beginning of the classes. And so feel free to reach out if you have any issues or questions. We're obviously also happy to talk with anybody else who has concerns. So we do have close connections with the GCFF. And there are cross issues because sometimes faculty are not just instructors of undergrads, but they're also instructors of grads and sometimes supervisors. And so there are cross issues, and it's good to maintain those lines of conversation. And then also with ASUO, I think it is extremely important that we begin to solidify some of these lines of communication between organized groups of students and faculty, because I think we are in an extremely challenging, complicated situation that's not going away in the next 3 months or probably the next 3 years. So to the extent that we can build solidarity around common causes, we obviously should. We're happy to have those conversations. Campus Labor Council is a great place for those conversations to continue, but also, just informally and as things arise. So I'll leave it there. Again, thank you, Matthew, for organizing this. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you need anything from United Academics.
Thanks. Nick, anything you'd like to plug, either ASUO or Reclaim? Or
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you, Solidarity News. This has been really good, especially because as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't seem like students have been able to express our views and talk about this, reopening and where we are at with this. So it's nice to have this space to be able to do that. So I really appreciate that. Thank you to the other panelists. I really enjoyed hearing your perspectives on what's going on in your various areas. And this has been a really good conversation. I'll plug the ASUO Instagram, but it's at ASUO.gov. I think it's the same for Facebook, but the ASUO executive runs those pages. So stay tuned there for updates and stuff about what ASUO is doing. And Senate post stuff on there every once in a while whenever we have access. But yeah, and then for Reclaim UO, that is definitely still going, and you can follow them at Reclaim UO on Facebook and Instagram as well. And then we also have like a website, which I think is like Reclaim Oregon Higher Ed something. It's on our social media, so you can find it there. But yeah, that's still going, and like there's a lot planned for this upcoming year. So, and like yeah, just trying to work on addressing like those big structural issues and like power imbalances that we've kind of like touched on a lot throughout this meeting. So yeah, if anyone wants to be involved in that or anything like that, wants to connect, definitely reach out to those pages. You can find our website, email, stuff like that there. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, but I really appreciate this and like look forward to continued conversations with all of you and trying to make this work and keep everyone safe. Like literally everyone, like not just students, faculty, and students, but like also this community that the UO is in, like Eugene, Springfield, and yeah, just keep centering that, and that safety and should be the number one priority. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Rajiv?
Yeah, sure. First, yeah, thank you, Matthew, for bringing us together, for planning this. Really appreciate the invite. It was really great to get a chance to talk to all these folks, who you invited. Looking forward to definitely doing a meeting, through the Campus Labor Council or otherwise, and figuring out ways to connect as we go forward. In terms of for GTFF, we planned a series of open assemblies around COVID. So that was a sort of early way for us to try to get information out to members about what we might be facing. We tried to do it based on particular job categories, whether you're in a lab or whether you're in a teaching, more instructional position or an administrative position. So we tried to do that. Certainly need to get some updates up on our website, gtff3544.net. We have a coronavirus update section. I think we'll be looking to put some updates related to the meetings that a few of us have been attending, and also just to let folks know about, we have a COVID response committee within our union, just to orient around like what are the different pieces of this that we need to take on, whether it's sort of reaching out to legislators or whether it's sort of actual organizing. They help to organize the assemblies, but other forms of organizing going forward for the conditions that I think some folks are already facing, especially the folks in labs, thinking about conditions that they're already dealing with. So yeah, I think that we're trying to get a grasp of what's happening. I think we'll know a lot more on the 26th about where we stand. But I think the key thing is let's say it's fully remote, or I mean not fully, but maybe mostly remote. I think we'll still have a set of issues that we have to orient around, and we have to sort of we see some momentum building. I want to keep that momentum building for us and connect it to, some of the momentum that's going to be there for the other unions on campus, for students, and to try to think about ways that we can sort of have some big picture considerations about what do we actually need to change about the way this university functions based on, again, new lessons that have come out through COVID in terms of how university decision-making operates, who makes those decisions, and where we fit into all of this. And we see ourselves again and again sort of included in a manner that really doesn't end up meaning a whole lot. It's sort of just for the sake of saying that they, to put that line in the email that, look, we reached out to faculty, staff, and GEs and students to go forward with this thing. And a lot of the times I read the email, I was like, we were reached out to in such a limited manner that how did you even go ahead and write that email? And it's just to say that you did it. And so I think we really need to take that, kind of identify that this is something we come across again and again, kind of anticipate some of the issues that we're dealing with. And I think that the way forward really is, how do we bring, even just in this meeting, we have representatives that, really bring together a lot of constituents on campus, and that we really represent a lot of folks on campus, and that how do we bring these different forces together into some kind of common vision where we have, faculty, staff, GEs, students, student athletes, and all kinds of, other folks even in the community to come together and actually think about what the university could be, like a different way of thinking about the university, how we could transform the university, a different model for this that actually works for all of us on campus and for the community. I think for me, that's the only way forward, and that's really what we need to be working on. And I hope that this sort of experience and these kinds of discussions help us move that ball forward.
Thank you. Johnny, are you there? The question, just closing up, anything you want to plug, how people can follow SCIU, and if there's any sort of call to action?
Well, I look forward to seeing whatever decision is made on August 26th. I think we should think about getting together, maybe use a different forum to live stream again after the decision is made, because obviously it's a great time for us to try to create some form of unity because we all are in the same boat. Yeah, I think we do represent a lot of people, and we have one thing in common. We want the well-being of our members and students on campus. And with that said, you can follow us at SCIU 085. But most importantly, I think this forum is a great way for us to talk about issues and be. I mean, you got the Campus Labor Council, but you also have this way of having people see us and chat about issues that we see that needs to be addressed in regards to the covert leave. So thank you again. This is really interesting. Again, I had a real hard time with this format. Maybe we can try another one next time. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, now just wrap up that, my name's Matthew. You can follow what I'm up to at solidarity.substack.com, and I'll include, if any of the panelists have links they want to add, I'll put it out in the next newsletter, and there's a link in the description of this video. And yeah, thanks to all the panelists, Chris, Nick, Rajiv, and Johnny. Have a nice night, everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
Matthew.
Bye.
Bye.